Good evening. Welcome, sisters and brothers, to WELL's fifth webinar in our 2021 series titled, What Local Leaders Need to Address the Water Energy Nexus. My name is Victor Griego. I'm the president and founder of WELL. And I'd like to first welcome tonight's sponsors for making this webinar possible and showing support for the mission of WELL. I want to thank the California Association Sanitation Agencies, the LA Department of Water and Power, and the Mesa Water District. We have a few board members that registered from the Mesa Water District, Vice President Sean Dwayne, Director Fred Bachmiller, and Director James Fissler. So thank you to our sponsors, because again, without your support, we would not be able to do this work. So thank you for your support. Of course, I'd like to welcome all the local elected officials from cities and counties and school districts, as well as, of course, water agencies throughout California. We have people who've registered all the way up in Cloverdale, Stockton, through the Central Valley, down to Coachella, San Diego, so welcome. So before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone of WELL's mission. In our mission statement, which is on our website and other materials, we educate Latino elected officials about California water policy to promote timely and equitable actions that serve to develop a robust economy, healthy communities, and a resilient environment for all Californians. And also, remember, WELL is not just for Latinos. It's in our name, of course, but we here at WELL believe anyone who serves a Latino constituency is a Latino leader. And in California, that's about 90% of all elected officials. So that means everyone is welcome to participate in the programs that we have. And I also would like to have a special invitation to all of you to our WELL Untapped Education and Training Fellowship. Untapped is a 6-month learning program where you'll visit different California watersheds to learn about water policy and issues from that local watershed perspective. So to learn more about the Untapped Fellowship, go to our website or the chat room on the Zoom webinar. So tonight we have a great group of panelists, starting with one of our own Untapped graduates and WELL leader, Mr. Igor Trigub. Igor will be our moderator this evening. He is a former Berkeley Rental Stabilization Board Commissioner, and he works as a policy analyst for the California Solar and Storage Association. So we believe he is very prepared to moderate this exciting panel this evening. So without further ado, allow me to introduce our WELL leader, Mr. Igor Trigub, to kick off this exciting, important conversation. Igor, you're on.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Victor. I am thrilled to be here today to talk about this incredibly important topic, the water energy nexus. I have worked in the energy sector for a minute, 15 years to be exact, almost 15 years. And I think that balancing our water and our energy resources, while always a pressing issue, is absolutely critical today. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to invite to the virtual stage our expert panelists for today's discussion. First up is Teresa Herrera, and this particular agency has a near and dear place in my heart. My folks live in the Silicon Valley, and so they rely on clean, reliable water from this important agency. Ms. Herrera is the general manager of the Silicon Valley Clean Water Agency. Please take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Victor and Igor, for that wonderful introduction. And I'm very honored to be invited to speak here to talk about a topic that I'm very passionate about and really excited to share what we do at Silicon Valley Clean Water. So in our case, clean, the word clean is a verb. So we are a wastewater agency. We're a joint powers authority in the Mid-Peninsula area of San Francisco Bay. And maybe we can just go to the next slide and it'll show a little bit better where we're located. So the end of the orange arrow is pointing basically to our treatment plant. As you can see right on the bay, south of San Mateo Bridge. And the picture inset just shows an aerial view of our treatment plant. So we take sewage from the local community in the area, our joint powers partners, and convey it to our treatment plant, treat it, and then either reuse it or send some of the discharge out to the bay. So a little bit about myself. I'm the general manager, as Igor noted. I'm a civil engineer by education and have about 33 years experience. And I wanted to focus the question on, so how do we emphasize the water energy nexus? And as I was contemplating this, I was thinking, you know, it really takes the right mindset to, that's the very fundamental beginning, is to have the right mindset. And to me, the right mindset is to be passionate about something, to have a commitment towards solving any issues that arise. Sustainability and stewardship of the environment and public health obviously is key. And then to do that, at least at our agency, I really emphasize creativity and open-mindedness. How can we do our work better? How can we do our job better? What creative ideas are out there that are untapped that we can take advantage of? And let's go to the next slide. So no wastewater treatment presentation can go by without a graphic of the process. And I'm certainly not going to go through this process a little bit too detailed, but basically what happens is we get raw sewage, we separate out the water from the solids, and fundamentally what we do is we take something harmful and transform it into something beneficial, into several beneficial things. So through a series of processes, the end result that we get is clean water. We get biosolids that have a variety of uses. We get electricity and we get heat. So it's a really complex process that is worthwhile and you know, brings forth a lot of, again, untapped resources that a lot of people just don't think about. So the next slide, please. The next slide just shows some, if it can get there, okay. So back to the right mindset. To me, I wanted to focus on three things. The first of which is water is water. And that, I think, is key to solve California's water crisis that we're in. The other point I wanted to make is that wastewater is a commodity. It's not seen as that yet. I think there are some inroads to getting us there, but we really need to change the mindset of not only elected officials, certainly the public, regulators, engineers, you know, all across the board. And then lastly, creativity in all things. There are, again, untapped, creative, innovative ideas that we need to embrace. The wastewater field tends to be a fairly conservative field for good reason. I mean, our charge is to protect public health and to protect the environment. At the same time, we can do that while we bring in some innovative ideas too. And those boxes on the bottom and with the little icons are things that we do at our particular treatment plant. We always look towards ways to reduce our energy. We produce a biogas through the natural process of treating sewage, and we make electricity as well as heat. We take organics from this local solid waste hauler that we're created a partnership with. Fats, oils, and greases from restaurants. We do biological drying to a biochar, which has multitude of uses. And then, of course, a lot of people think of wastewater treatment, the end result only being recycled water, and that's certainly a very important one. But there's a whole lot more than just recycling water. And the next slide, I think just wraps up what I wanted to emphasize. So in a wastewater treatment facility, the end result is you get water, you get energy from the inherent processes that it takes to clean the water, and you get these solids that can be used, processed in a way that the end result is a very beneficial product, what we call biochar. It's almost a pure carbon source. So we found uses for it all the way from creating food grade plastics to 3D printing, because it is just such a pure carbon source. And I think I'll leave it at that. The next slide just shows my contact information and our agency's various social networking. And I guess we'll take some questions at the end of all the panelists, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I simply cannot wait to ask you. I have so many questions about your presentation. But before we
Awesome.
get into that, we do get a chance to hear from a couple more presenters who are equally awesome and knowledgeable. Our next presenter is Teresa Kim, and Teresa is a civil engineering associate for the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Ms. Kim, please feel free to take it away.
Thank you, Igor. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Well, for inviting me to speak and share to you LADWP's effort in the water energy nexus. I am a civil engineer. I've been practicing civil engineer for a little over 15 years. Currently, I am the supervisor of the resource development and supply assessment group within the water system at DWP. One of our major things that we do in our group is we study the relationship between the water and energy along with greenhouse gas. And we've been doing this for quite a while. The reason why we're studying it is just because LADWP services a large population of people. And on the next slide, I'll show you some quick statistics on our geographical area and our service area and the amount of people we serve. So LADWP, we strive to deliver safe and reliable water to over 4 million people in the city of Los Angeles. That's about close to half of the population of Los Angeles County. And that water is distributed over about 500 square miles. So that's about 10 times the size of a city of San Francisco. So it's a pretty large area that we have to serve. And on average, we deliver about 500,000 acre feet of water to the city. And in order to provide that reliable water supply, we have a very diverse water supply mix. Next slide, please. So our water comes from various areas. We get imported water supplies coming from Northern California that travels through the State Water Project. And we also get some from Colorado that's provided to us by Metropolitan Water District, which you'll hear a little bit later. And we operate the Los Angeles Aqueduct, which is owned and operated by LADWP. This brings water about 300 miles away from LA, coming from the Eastern Sierra. And then we also have supplies in our local background, in our backyard. We get it from San Fernando Basin and Central Basin, that's our local groundwater. And here we also provide recycled water for non-potable usage as well. And we also highlight conservation as a water supply, and I'll touch upon that later on how important conservation is. That's part of the water energy nexus. Next slide. So with each water supply comes an associated energy intensity, which is the energy that's related to the whole process of bringing the source of the water, coming from the conveyance, bringing from Northern California or even from the Eastern Sierra. And then once we get that raw source of water, it has to be treated through our filtration facility. And then it goes through our distribution, which allows, we have to pump it through in order for it to get to their customers. And for groundwater, we have to extract it at certain depths before it's even, it goes through our filtration system and is treated. And likewise, it goes through the distribution. We also, like I said, serve recycled water. And so you heard from Teresa's presentation, the amount of steps that goes through that you have to take raw sewage and treat it up to many levels before it can be used for non-potable sources. So each water supply that I showed has its own energy intensity factor. Next slide, please. And that's represented in this graph here. So the energy intensity is measured in kilowatts per acre foot. To give you sort of a reference of what those units are, a typical residential household would use about 500 kilowatt hours per 500 kilowatt hours per month. And an acre foot of water is, if you imagine a football size field, fill it about a foot deep. That's an acre foot of water. And that amount of water can serve up to 3 households in a year. So as you can see here, we divide our supplies based on what we produce and what we distribute. And also we also serve metropolitan water. So our local supplies, because it travels a much shorter distance, it's less energy intensive. And then our imported supplies, because it's coming from further distance, there's a lot of energy it takes in order to bring it here. And these factors tremendously impact our energy profile. So you'll see it as the ratios of our water varies according to the hydrological year. Next slide, please. So here I'm showing you a graph of the water supply mix for the last 20 years. And as you can see, the last 20 years has been pretty much on average really dry. And so we depend a lot on meeting our demands by purchasing water from Metropolitan Water District. And that comes along with a higher energy intensity. And so over the last 20 years, because of the imported supplies, we have a higher energy profile than expected because of those purchased imported water. Next slide, please. So here it's our energy profile, which shows the total energy related to all our water supply. That includes metropolitan, includes groundwater, and LA aqueduct water. Blue line represents our total energy that is spent to deliver all the supplies to our customers. And as you can see whenever it peaks, that really relates to when it's dry. And when it starts decreasing and going down, that's when we start having more of our local supplies that are less energy intensive. And overall, it reduces our energy. The other thing is in really dry years, you can see that we graphed on here the red line, which shows the amount of energy related to our imported supplies. It takes a large portion of our whole energy profile. Next slide, please. So I want to emphasize the importance of our local supply, which is our least energy intensive. So number one is our Los Angeles aqueduct that comes from the Eastern Sierra. The benefit of that one is it's all purely gravity driven. So there's no energy required to bring this water down to Los Angeles over 300 miles. The other benefit that it provides for us is that it produces energy. There's 12 hydropower plants along the Los Angeles aqueduct. It's a clean energy source, so there's no carbon footprint related to it. And on average, it produces close to about 4,000 kilowatts per acre foot. So for every acre foot of water, it can supply about almost 8 households per month. So that's a good amount. That's an advantage of having a very clean source that is very least energy intensive and has the benefit of providing energy as well. Our other water supply on the next slide, please, that I wanted to touch upon is it's an intangible source, and it's water conservation. We consider water conservation as an actual water supply as well, because without water conservation, we would have to replace that with some sort of other water that's available, such as groundwater, and also purchasing water as well. Conservation has absolutely zero energy related to it, and how we implement conservation is through there's the local code, and then there's city and state ordinances that help along the way. We also offer a lot of rebates to our customers as well, and there's a lot of partnerships that we have that we outreach with people to sort of spread the message that to help integrate water conservation and also increase water use efficiency within their household. So conservation, LEDWP has been practicing it for over 50 years, and we have greatly, it's benefited us, especially on the water energy side. Next slide, please. So here we're showing you the statistics of the amount of water that we saved since 1990. So the amount of water we saved since 1990 due to all these active conservation efforts is about close to 7,000 acre feet. And that equates to about serving, that amount of water can serve up to 2.3 million households. Relating to that is conservation takes zero energy for it because we save the energy in treatment and in distributing the water as well. And also you save on end user as well. You don't have to heat your water and things like that. So all in all, there's many benefits when you integrate water conservation. Next slide, please. We are continuing to reduce our energy usage as well through improvements to our facilities and changing our plants or changing things to constantly reduce our energy consumption and then also that correlated greenhouse gas. Next slide, please. And so all in all, as DWP trying to reduce its energy consumption, our carbon footprint, we are also actively trying to increase our renewables. So our power system has a plan to increase renewable supplies and be carbon free by 2035. The way that they will get to that is phasing out natural gas and carbon and replacing that with cleaner energy sources such as solar, wind, hydropower, and increasing our storage capacity. And that concludes my presentation.
Teresa, thank you so much. That was really eye-opening, and I can't wait to ask you some questions as well. Speaking of questions, before we get to our next speaker, I wanted to remind you that this is an interactive panel, and we would love to get all of you into this conversation. And so if you have any questions that have popped up or will be popping up as we hear from our final speaker today, you can use the Q&A feature in Zoom. It will be on the bottom right of your screen. It should be to, just to the left of the leave button. And you can put your question in there. We would love to get to as many questions as we can get answered in the time we have together. So I look forward to asking your questions. And now, without further ado, I wanted to introduce Mr. John Jontry. Mr. Jontry is the Assistant Group Manager of Water Systems Operations at the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, which actually used to serve me when Southern California, Ventura County specifically, was one of the places I grew up in. So thank you so much for helping me get water and make sure that all of my family and neighbors got a chance to do the same. Please take it away.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Igor, and thanks, to everybody for the invitation. Really excited to talk to you about this particular topic, and it's very timely considering we're heading into the peak demand season on the electric system. Just by way of background real quick, my experience is 90% in the electric utility business. I came to Metropolitan from San Diego Gas and Electric Company. And so I kind of tend to come at things from the electric energy point of view. So that's going to kind of color my commentary today. So anyway, let me introduce you to the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we're the nation's largest wholesaler of water. We're a cooperative with 26 member agencies across Southern California. We cover 6 counties, 26 member agencies, and 19 million people. And in that population, we serve about 50% of the water consumed, give or take. And we provide that water from a couple different major sources. from the Northern California, from the Northern Sierra through the State Water Project, and from the Colorado River on the border between Arizona and California. Next slide, please. So there you see the two main sources. The California Aqueduct, the State Water Project, reaches all the way up to Lake Oroville in Northern California. And it comes down through the California Aqueduct over to Tehachapi Mountains into the LA Basin. The other main source is the Colorado River Aqueduct, and it extends from Colorado River all the way into Lake Matthews in, I believe, Riverside County. This California Aqueduct State Water Project is owned and operated by the Department of Water Resources, a state agency. The CRA, Colorado River Aqueduct, was built by Metropolitan in the late 1920s, went into service in the 1930s, and it runs about 300 miles from Colorado River into Southern California. Both of these aqueducts require a significant amount of pumping in order to move that water from point A into point B. And I'll talk a little bit about the magnitude of that power, how much it costs, and what it takes to get it here. During times of drought like this, our state water allocation tends to decline. Right now, we're at the 5% allocation of what we're, what the aqueduct was designed to handle. So during those times, we tend to rely more on the water from the Colorado River. And so energy demands on the State Water Project decline, but energy demands on the CRA tend to increase. There's a little bit of difference in the two aqueducts. The State Water Project goes longer distance and over higher terrain than the Colorado River Aqueduct does. So the rule of thumb is it's about 3 megawatt hours per acre foot to move an acre foot on the State Water Project. It's about 2 megawatt hours per acre foot on the CRA. So next slide. So this is roughly how the energy breaks down. The slide on the left, or the chart on the left, shows you that, as you can see, 98% of the energy we consume as Metropolitan goes into moving that water. It's in the pumping demand. Only 2% goes into distribution and treatment. We have 5 treatment plants here in Southern California, and use both chlorine but primarily ozone as the disinfectant. You can see that treatment is a very small part. I mean, most of the energy goes to just moving the water from the Colorado River or from the Sierras into Southern California. The costs also are a little bit different. Like I said, the energy required to move water in State Water Project is higher because of the distance and because of the terrain. So that's really the majority of our costs. It costs less money to move water on the CRA because of the terrain. Next slide, please. So where does that energy come from? Well, Metropolitan is fortunate to be the largest contractor for energy on the Hoover Dam. We are entitled to, I believe, about a quarter of the energy the Hoover Dam produces, which is a lot. It's a couple hundred megawatts. And we also contract for energy on Parker Dam, which is downstream of Hoover. We have a fleet of small hydroelectric generators across the distribution system that basically act as run-of-river generators. We get wholesale power from the California Independent System Operator, and we connect to retail providers for our distribution and treatment plants, such as SoCal Edison and LEDWP. Next slide. So this is a map of our distribution system. We've got 15 small hydro plants scattered across that system. They basically run when we're moving water on that part of the system. When we're not moving water, those plants don't run. So they basically act as small run-of-river generators. It's 130 megawatts of capacity, but due to the sort of intermittent nature of the way they operate, they generally are operating around between 10 and 20 megawatts at any one particular time. Yeah, next slide, please. Well, I said, mentioned at the front, this is timely. The energy system in California has been stressed the last couple of years. Oops, there we go. What does that mean going forward? Well, we're in a record drought, so that means low state water project allocation. We're relying more on the Colorado River. Levels on Lake Mead are declining, so the Hoover generation is also declining. Of course, you get hot, dry weather. People demand more water and more electricity. Tighter electric markets mean higher energy prices, higher costs for moving that water into Southern California. And last but not least, here in Southern California, it's everywhere now. We're in the middle of fire season, and we have the risk of public safety power shutoffs at our facilities. Next slide. And just real quick, I'd just like to give a quick plug to our energy sustainability plan. We kind of taken a holistic look at our whole system, from pumping load to distribution to treatment. And we're looking at innovative ways of getting better flexibility, better resiliency, and maintaining and reducing our costs and exposure to price volatility. Last week, on the day-ahead market for energy on Thursday spiked to $500 per megawatt hour, which is 10 to 20 times what it normally is. So going forward, trying to mitigate that price volatility and limiting the impact to our member agencies is really important. Next slide. So that's it. That's my presentation. I hope that was interesting. I think it's interesting, but I'm an electrical engineer, so I find megawatts fascinating. So.
Thank you so much, John. And I will echo that. Fun fact, before I started working at the California Solar and Storage Association and Rooftop Scale Solar as their senior policy advisor, I spent 12 years at the Department of Energy doing nuclear regulatory oversight. And as an engineer, I do find this stuff fascinating, and particularly that nexus between engineering and policy. So I love that all of you really provided that integration of the technical and the policy, because they so seamlessly match together. So before we get into Q&A, I wanted to make another plug. I'm sure you have lots of questions. I know I have lots of questions, so that I am not the one asking all the questions and we hear from you. Please put any questions that you've got in the Q&A, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can. That said, and going back to my original role, where, as a nuclear safety engineer, we definitely had to plan for the worst case scenario. And then make sure that it never occurred. So I bring that up because right now, when it comes to, looking at situational factors and site-specific conditions, we have a drought. We're in a drought condition. It's really, really, really bad, and it's probably going to get even worse. So my question to any of you or all of you that want to jump on this one is, how does the water energy nexus apply to California's current drought crisis? And specifically, to what an extent, if any, will hydropower be affected?
I can take the question about hydropower. It's definitely affected. Part of what led to the energy crisis that occurred in California last year was a result of low hydro assets, low hydro energy being available. Some of you may have seen national news coverage on Lake Mead, that it's at the lowest point it's been, I think, in a very long time, and in fact will be, I believe, is forecast to go into deficiency in the next few months. Now, every foot of elevation you lose at Lake Mead, reduces the amount of hydro generation available. And eventually, if the lake gets low enough, then there won't be any available. So, and that's 1,800, I think, megawatts of very low cost, very highly reliable energy that would no longer be available in the Western energy markets. So it definitely has. That's one example, but that's the same patterns are occurring across the entire West. So it's definitely an issue, definitely a concern.
I'll jump in with just something that I thought about it. So, you know, hearing John's presentation, and great presentation, by the way, both Teresa and John, but I'm really struck by the amount of megawatts that are produced from the hydroelectric plants in your system. And you talked about 130 megawatts, and then Lake Mead itself, just 1,800 megawatts. That's enormous amount. So, you know, thinking about our treatment plant, we produce 1.2 megawatts. So, you know, orders of magnitude less, but still, you know, what one of our taglines for Silicon Valley Clean Water is one drop at a time. So I'm thinking, you know, just every megawatt counts, right? Every drop of water counts. So looking at it from a micro, you know, the microcosm to the macro, I think is probably something that we need to be able to capture.
And I would like to add upon that too. So at DWP, we provide potable water. So you probably saw in my graphs earlier that in dry years, our energy profile goes up because now we would have to compensate that. Our low LA aqueduct water, which, you know, has no energy related to it, we now have to buy water from Metropolitan, and Metropolitan has to spend that energy to bring it down to us. So what we've been doing that we stress upon is water conservation. We're actively reaching out and teaching people and educating people, sending the message about water conservation, that once it's integrated, we don't have to, you know, bring any additional water, and we're saving that energy because we're not also, our LA aqueduct's not producing hydropower at the same time. So because we have a sister agency that's the power system, and we know that hydropower production is not consistent, it's weather driven. They're also working on other renewable supplies as well, such as being able to capture solar and capturing wind. The only problem is now we're developing a way to store that energy, and we're looking at ways to be able to capture that energy to sustain us, to carry us over, over these dry periods.
Thank you so much to all of you for those responses. And this is actually a good nexus into the next question I'm going to ask you. It comes from one of our participants, and they're asking, how and with whom can we open a dialogue about integrating atmospheric water generation, or AWG, into local municipalities and or water districts? And because I surmise we may have a different level of familiarity with AWG, perhaps in your responses, if one of you could also touch on what it means to you.
I guess I'm curious. That's kind of the first I've heard of that technology. I'm curious as to how that works.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I have not heard of that technology, and so I'm interested too.
Yeah.
I take a stab at it. I think as we're studying climate change and all exploring different ways to, you know, diversify our water supply, I think the closest thing I've heard about this atmospheric technology is maybe it's considered, I'm not too sure, it might be cloud seeding. That's something that we heard that's been in the works for a while with a lot of scientists and universities. And I think it's, for us, it's something that we're exploring. It's pretty new in technology. So at the same time, we're also exploring other ways to increase our local supply. Right now, we have a project right now that we call Operation Next, where we're taking wastewater and then being able to treat that up, and hopefully when regulations are in place, that can be served as potable water as well. But I think in terms of cloud seeding, that's a new technology that DWP has been, we are always interested in exploring new opportunities and technologies out there. We're just currently trying to work our way through implementing all our local supply projects.
Thank you so much. And yes, I look forward as well to learning more about AWG. Maybe, I think this came from Jamal, if you could type a little bit more in the Q&A about any links, we can, this is exciting. We have to, you know, technology comes of necessity, and anything we can do to innovate on an old concept is important. The flip side of that is we very much have to learn from our history to prevent history from repeating if it's not good history. So I'm reminded, Teresa, of one of the slides you showed where we have been in droughts before and we have had to deal with them. So can you or any of you talk about a successful water conservation campaign and why it was so successful?
I'll just mention I'm not really an expert on the details, but Metropolitans had been involved in a program, I think for quite a number of years now, on replacing native or grass, regular grass with artificial turf within our service area, and I think that's actually been a tremendous success. I think I don't know the details top of my head. I think anybody would be interested about that can contact our external affairs group, and I think they got some details on that. But I believe that's been very successful. And over the last 10, 20 years, the water demand, in part because of that, has declined significantly. So I think that's some sort of low hanging fruit that was, watering takes quite a bit of watering. Regular turf takes quite a bit of water, so it's a very simple, very effective way of reducing that demand. So I think we've had some tremendous success. I think we've kind of reached the point of diminishing returns now. I think there's only so much grass to replace in Los Angeles, and we replaced a lot of it. So, but that's that type of conversation or conservation has worked very well for us.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and touch upon that as well. So in the Los Angeles area, because we've implemented conservation for over 50 years, although the population has grown by over 1 million over 50 years, our demand is still much, much lower than what it was that you can see 50 years ago. And that's all due to the different ways of conservation being implemented through codes, people taking advantage of the rebates. And we also partner with Metropolitan on their, their Water Smart program that allows us to reach an audience and make it easy for people to apply for rebates and know about the rebate program. So one of the major successes that we've had recently was everybody probably remembers the 2012 to 2016 extensive dry years that we had. That was a period where LA reduced our water consumption. We also reduce our daily capita, and we continue to have goals to encourage people to go ahead and keep your water demands low and find ways to cut back your water consumption so that, in terms of the energy nexus, we wouldn't have to spend a lot of energy in order to produce that additional water.
I'd like to give a plug for the wastewater side of things in terms of water conservation. And so we've had a lot of conservation in the Mid-Peninsula area of San Francisco Bay. And what that means is that there's less water coming to the treatment plant, which just requires us to modify the process a little bit because you're not getting the flows that we normally do. Although we're getting still the concentrations and the masses of the solids material. So, it's definitely manageable, but it does have an effect. The other part of it is the recycled water part is all part of the equation, right? Conservation, recycling. We, as a treatment plant, need to filter our water and disinfect the water anyway, whether it goes to the bay or to non-potable reuse for landscape irrigation. So our costs are equivalent for either one. If we want to treat it to a higher level, obviously the cost goes up significantly, but at this point, we can really offset a lot of the water use for landscape irrigation just from our treatment plant.
That is fascinating. And I'm loving how each of these questions we're getting flows into the next, no pun intended at all. Please keep them coming. Please continue to put questions in the Q&A. The next one is a wonderful segue. And uh, Teresa, since you mentioned the Bay Area, my joke, I live in Berkeley, is I tell folks I can see San Francisco from my backyard if it was a clear day, which is almost never except in the summer, and if I had a backyard, which uh, I don't have one,
Yeah.
and most folks in my community don't have big backyards if they have one at all. And that gets into the heart of this question. The assertion is that the majority of ratepayers pay for water saving programs through their rates and that money flows to the people that can afford to change out their landscapes. How do we make water conservation a more equitable benefit?
I'll just, I think one of the ways Metropolitan has done that is we partner with actually with Southern California Gas, which is the natural gas provider for I think pretty much all Southern California from San Diego up through LA. And part of their mission is outreach to 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 communities that disadvantaged communities and so forth in order to extend the reach of those water conservation efforts. So that's one way we've done that, and partnering with our member agencies and other towns, municipalities to extend the reach of those programs.
And in LADWP, we offer some free fixtures that's available, and there's a lot of community outreach through our neighborhood councils, through many organizations that outreach to every type of community in Los Angeles that can offer that information for free items, also rebates that's available. We also have something called the Technical Assistant Program, where there's representatives from DWP that can go to somebody's home and conduct an assessment and see what items that they can integrate into their home that can reduce. So every drop counts. Even if they can't replace their lawn, there's other means and methods that can reduce that water and energy as well.
And I'll chime in on, again, I'll sound like a broken record, but the only water distribution we do is recycled water. And both our agency supplies it to the city, Redwood City, but there's other agencies that provide recycled water, and several, including Redwood City, provides the water for free. So if you come in and there's fill stations that you can go to, and some people have big totes that they'll fill up 500-gallon totes. So kind of a way to offset the need to conserve water, but on the other side there can be some recycled water available for either low or like I said, a lot of these are free water sources.
Thank you so much. Really good answers to a very timely topic, especially as we are getting into another drought condition. By the way, we're getting some crowdsourced answers on atmospheric water generation, and the consensus seems to be that it's pulling water directly from the atmosphere by refrigeration or condenser systems, like the condensate that comes from air conditioners, which is basically what you said. So that's awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for crowdsourcing knowledge. My next question is on a very timely topic. Today, it's been in the news. I'm sure most of you have heard that the Biden administration may have the contours of a deal that they struck with several members of the U.S. Senate in a bipartisan fashion. And assuming we get an infrastructure package passed through both houses and signed, how will those increased funding opportunities from the federal government, or I know the state budget is about to be signed as well once agreement is reached on a couple of final points of contention, how will increased state funding how could it be used on water infrastructure support in order to provide that support for balancing out water and energy systems.
I guess I'd offer a couple of examples, projects that we're currently working on, and hopefully we'll see more of. Metropolitan has partnered with the LA Sanitation Department on a regional recycled water program, which is building a pilot plant to recycle wastewater into potable water. And we've also participated in the California PUC's small generator incentive plan or program, which in our case is funding some battery storage for a couple of our treatment plants. And the purpose of those is to sort of levelize the demand on those treatment plants so that during peak load conditions, when energy prices are high and reserves are small, that it reduces demand on the grid, reduces stress on the grid. So I think those are a couple of examples of state or federal funding that could help us work with member agencies, with other cities and towns, with research groups and so forth, in order to start implementing and testing some of this newer and more innovative technology.
I'll piggyback onto what John said, because we did obtain a CEC grant for battery storage. So we purchased some Tesla batteries and yeah, via the grant. We've also gotten funding from WIFIA, the Water Infrastructure Financing Innovative Act. We've gotten quite a bit of money from that for changing out our pumped force main to a gravity sewer. So, fixing a 60-year-old pipe, but at the same time reducing energy by doing that. So WIFIA found that a worthwhile effort. And then we've also been getting loans from the State Water Board via their State Revolving Fund program, similarly for our conveyance system program. And every project that we do looks to reduce our energy. I mean, that's one of our guiding principles on any project that we undertake.
Yeah, and DWP, we actively look at these government fundings as a way for us to, most importantly, implement our projects, study our projects a little bit more. And overall, it allows us to reduce any of the financial impact on our ratepayers, that we don't have to raise rates in order to, streamline into these new projects that would eventually get us to these points where we're saving water and we're saving energy. So we depend a lot on these grants and loans to help us initiate our planning processes and go through the implementation of the projects in order to just make sure that we give reliable water and keep costs very low to our ratepayers.
Yeah, I think the energy intensity numbers that Teresa showed in her presentation really tell a tale. Every acre foot of water we don't have to bring into Southland is 2-3 megawatts of energy we're not demanding on the grid. We think that a megawatt is roughly enough energy to serve 1,000 homes. So that's water that we don't need, and that's energy we're not expending to move that water. So the more we reduce our consumption, the more we can generate locally. That's just that much more demand we're not putting on an already stressed system.
Yeah, thank you so much. And this is a great note on which to ask the final question for tonight. Are there any emerging technologies that you're excited about that aren't implemented yet, but could be successful?
I would like to jump in here, because we currently have 3 projects that are ongoing at our treatment plant that could change the entire landscape for wastewater treatment. It's that innovative and really exciting, because it looks really promising. We are teaming with Stanford University. We have that advantage that there's some pretty smart people right up the hill from us doing research. And on our treatment plant site, we have these larger scale pilot tests going on. So there's one that I think is going on right now that has the potential to replace the secondary treatment in a wastewater treatment facility. The biochar that I was talking about started back in 2014 with a entrepreneurial company that came and said, we can dry your solids with biology, with bacteria, for basically a net zero energy use. And what is it, 7 years later, they're doing it, and we're giving them half of our solids. So there's again a lot of technologies out there that we're studying, and I'm sure Teresa and John are studying at their own facilities, but a lot of exciting ideas out there right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to our wonderful panelists for talking with me today and sharing a little bit of your insights and wisdom, and for sharing with all of us the Water and Energy Nexus. I'd like to now pass things off to WELL's new Executive Director, Pau Hernandez, to wrap things up.
Thank you very much, everyone, and especially thank you, Igor, and the rest of our panel for your time this evening. A special warm welcome again to any new members that have joined WELL on this evening's panel. As you can imagine, learning about water and energy it takes a long time. And one of our missions here is to make sure that we could expedite or compress some of that learning time and opportunities for you. As of this evening, I especially love the the conversation and the dialogue. I wrote a bunch of notes here that I'm going to go back and follow up with, with not only with my colleagues, but others around the region to learn a little bit more about the nexus between the water and the power. And more importantly, just use less water if possible. Before we depart tonight, I want to make sure that we all are aware of what we have next here at WELL, specifically with our next webinar. As we move forward and we think about, what the next future lies for us and in our constituents, in mid-August, we're going to be hosting another webinar that's focused around water jobs in the water sector. Excuse me. And as Igor mentioned earlier in one of the Q&A, and with the possible passing of an infrastructure bill, infrastructure equals jobs. And the next webinar will be focused in and around that. So hopefully you'll be able to learn about opportunities and examples of how you can bring jobs into your own communities. That could help, each and every one of us across the board here. So hopefully you're able to join, still be included in our mailing list. And the last piece I want to also give another plug, as our Victor said earlier this morning. Earlier this it's been a long day for me, but earlier this afternoon is our WELL Untapped Fellowship Program. This is, again, for elected officials, whether you're a school board member, a municipal city council member, mayor, city clerk, and again, those that are also on the water district boards. Please take the opportunity to learn more about this fellowship program. It will be starting up in January. Igor was also a past member of this program, so you can see the type of quality of individuals that we have that go through this program. It is a 6 months program, as Victor mentioned, and we'll start in January. The interest form is linked in the chat once again, so please take the opportunity to click on that, and feel free to either email myself or Brianne in regards to any additional questions that you might have. But please take an opportunity this evening to fill out that interest form, because this is where we really do a deep dive for the participants to understand how the infrastructure and water policy works throughout California. So with that, again, I want to take the opportunity to thank everyone. Make sure we thank all of our sponsors with Mesa Water District, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and of course, CASA for their support in educating and continuing our mission to move everyone forward. So with that, I want to say have a good evening, and we hope to see you in mid-August. Thank you.